Have you ever watched a TV show that after introducing the context, the main characters and the location, the tension or the problem is revealed? And as the show develops, it hooks you because it just drops hints and bits and pieces of information, possible solutions as to how they're going to figure out the twists and the turns. The show continues and you feel the tension, the crescendo, and all of a sudden, to be continued. Have you ever been a part of that? I remember for us, that's what it was like for Denise and I when we received the first couple of discs of the first season of the show called 24. We had gotten them on Netflix. 24 is a television series in which Kiefer Sutherland plays Jack Bauer. He's a CTU agent, counter-terrorist unit. And the reason why it's called 24 is because each episode is at 1 hour in a 24-hour period in which Bauer is racing against the clock to stop multiple terrorist attacks or plots. And as the multiple parts of the storyline are being developed, as the viewer, you're aware that the season only has 24 hours to resolve all of the problems, all of the issues that are being developed within the story. And so each episode is designed to tease you and leave you hanging until the last one. That's kind of the feeling that I got when as we come to this conclusion of our series, At World's End. You see, Jesus has promised, he has predicted that he is coming back. And we all know that time is running out. We can see bits and pieces, those interesting indicators that the Bible talks about in the future. There's so many loose ends to tie up. How is he going to do it all? And so, put your hands together for the last installment of At World's End. Oh, you don't have to clap, but here we go. So let me give you a little bit of context so we remember as what precipitated this conversation between Jesus and his disciples. They were leaving the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, and the disciples were filled with this almost a national and religious pride over the magnificent buildings that had made up the temple that King Herod had built for the Jews. This temple was a source of pride, an identity for the nation. It was a beautiful place, a strong place that seemed invincible. The temple was a sacred place, and Jesus tells them, not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down. The thought of the destruction of this temple was life-shattering to them. To them, it must have meant the end of Jerusalem, the end of their nation, the end of the world. And so in their mind, this also had to be the time that Jesus would return and rescue them and set up his kingdom, vanquish the Roman government. And so they ask, when is this going to happen? How will we know when these things are starting to happen? What is the sign of your return? So the disciples we know that they understand, it's very clear, Jesus has said he is coming back. And Jesus gives them the unmistakable sign of his return to look for this sign in the sky. Hey, if Batman had his bat signal, Jesus has his. He says in this verse, at that time, the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and all the nations of the earth will mourn. They will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory. And so Jesus continues to prepare his followers who were listening to him then, us who are listening to him today, and those in our future who will see these events happen. So Jesus continues to prepare his followers for his return. And in this morning's verses, Matthew chapter 24, beginning in verse 43, here's what we see. Jesus compares his return to a thief coming to break into a house. Jesus compares his return to a thief coming to break into a house. Now, if you knew that a thief was going to break into your home, maybe he or she would send you an email the night before. Maybe a few days before, they shot you a text and said, hey, Mr., Mrs. So-and-so, on this day, at this time, while all of you are sleeping, I'm going to break into your house. I'm coming in through the front door. I'm going to pick the lock, and I'm going to take what I want, by force if necessary. What would you do? Who did that? Hey, Jesus knows what you would do. Listen to what he says. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what time of the night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. Now, don't overcomplicate it. Jesus' point is simple. It is very clear. He tells us in verse 44, what's the point of this illustration? You also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him, just like a thief would. And so what is Jesus telling us? His big idea is this: I'm coming back. I'm coming back, so be ready for my return. I am coming back. Be ready for my return. Jesus also compared his return to an employer coming back to work. I'm sure you've all, as you've grown up, have had jobs, or maybe I'm sure most of you have jobs here. I remember one of my first jobs. I was still learning this whole work ethic thing. And the temptation was always there to goof off when the boss, my manager or supervisor, was not there. But hey, when I saw their car pull into the parking lot, all of a sudden I jumped back into work, all of a sudden start doing flipping burgers if I was working at McDonald's, or if I was organizing shoes at the department store I was working at. Jesus uses that same story, a similar example, in the next few verses. He says, who then is the faithful and wise servant whom the master has put in charge of the servants in his household to give them their food at the proper time? It will be good for that servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. I tell you the truth, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But suppose that servant is wicked, and Jesus tells us what he means by wicked, and says to himself, my master is staying away a long time. And then he begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with drunkards, something he would never do if his employer was around. The master of that servant, just like a thief, will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour he is not aware of. He will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now, did you just see the consequence for goofing off while the boss was not around? Are you kidding me? Seems kind of extreme, doesn't it? I mean, doesn't that seem unfair? Hey, all I was doing was goofing off a little bit. How about a word of warning? Maybe a temporary leave of absence, but not death. I mean, aren't I still an employee here? The lesson that Jesus is trying to get at is this, that for someone to conclude that Jesus, represented in the story by the employer, is delaying his coming, so therefore, hey, I have plenty of time to get right. I could put it off doing right. So for now, I'm going to do wrong and I'm going to live wrong. As far as Jesus is concerned, that attitude is an indicator of the condition of our souls. It means that they're not saved. And the consequence of that is judgment, hell. In other words, if you've really been rescued from your sin, then you will be motivated to be ready. If you really have experienced the saving grace, then you will be motivated to pay attention to the warnings that Jesus has given you. I'm coming back at an hour that you do not know. Just like an employer who leaves and puts his employees in charge and they begin to, are you sure you want to do that? So again, Jesus' big idea is this: I'm coming back. Be ready for my return. I'm coming back. Be ready for my return. Listen, if you think you have plenty of time to get right with God, be careful. I caution you, delaying, putting off this decision, because nobody knows. And even though we have some interesting indicators that we can see on the landscape, things that the Bible has predicted of the times he's referring to, listen, Jesus gives us those warnings to create an urgency within us to get ready, not to give us an excuse to delay getting ready. And so the first thing that I'm seeing here is that if you haven't done so already, to get ready means to trust in the gospel that changes your life and inserts that urgency within you to listen to the voice of Christ as he's telling you, I'm coming back. Are you ready? Have you believed in the gospel? The good news? The good news that you can be rescued from the bad news of God's judgment because of your sin? That what Jesus did for you on the cross and we just celebrated here, when you put your faith and trust in what he did for you, you're no longer his enemy, but now you become a friend. You become his child. And your position, your place as his child is secure, free from judgment. If you haven't done that, I urge you, I plead with you, make that decision today. Make that decision now. Don't delay. Because a delay, at least as Jesus is concerned, means that you're not ready. So on Friday, this past Friday, I officiated my first wedding since arriving here in Merced. I've been working out at this gym with a trainer and stuff, and word has gotten out that we have a pastor around here, so we got to watch our language. No, my trainer doesn't watch his language. Which is cool. I'm there. I love him, and he knows that I care about him, and so I just let him do him, be him, and he beats me up and gives me 35 to 45 minutes of torture every week. But anyway, word got out that, hey, I'm a pastor, and so one of the ladies there that I've worked out before, that he's trained us before, said, hey, would you be willing to? So we met, and we talked a little bit about Jesus. It was great, over here at the gardens on the M Street and 18th. What's that place called? What? The Gateway Gardens, yeah. Great little ceremony. So I got to do my first wedding here in Merced. It was awesome. But did you know that Jesus compares his return to a groom coming to celebrate his wedding? Jesus compares his return to a groom coming to celebrate his wedding. Let me give you a little backstory. Back in the day, marriages were arranged. And when the bride and the groom were of age, which was probably younger than it is today, the groom would go and express his interest, and then they would enter what's called a 1-year betrothal period. And legally, they were married. However, during that betrothal period, they couldn't seal the deal and experience the benefits of marriage, such as living together and sexual intimacy and others. And so during this year, what the groom would do is that he would go back to his parents' home and build an addition onto his parents' house for him and his bride to live in. In the meantime, during that year, as the year progressed, the bride and her bridesmaids would begin making preparation. They would begin preparing for the sudden, unexpected arrival of the groom coming to take his bride. And so during that year, they would live with this constant state of readiness, expectancy within their hearts. Why? Because as Jesus is telling us, my return is like a groom coming to celebrate his wedding. And so with that as the backdrop, Matthew 25, the first 13 verses, Jesus tells a story of 10 bridesmaids. And here they were waiting for the arrival of the bridegroom, who would arrive at some time during the night. And each of them, the story tells us, were given an oil-fueled lamp. This lamp wasn't like our lamp with electricity. It was a little container, and they would put some oil in it, and they had some sort of wick that would soak up the oil, and you would light it at its tip, and it would light up the room. 5 of the bridesmaids were wise, and they said, we need fuel for our lamps, and so they brought some fuel. 5 were foolish and only brought their lamps. Well, at midnight, all of the bridesmaids heard the call to come and meet the groom. And so realizing that their lamps were out of fuel, the foolish bridesmaids asked the wise ones for oil. But they refused, saying they didn't have enough to share. And so while the foolish ones take off to go find more oil, the bridegroom arrives. And it's only the wise bridesmaids that then accompany him to the wedding. The others arrive too late, and they're excluded, rejected from participating. Jesus tells us the lesson in verse 13. Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour in which the Son of Man is coming. That's his point in that story. Just like a groom coming to pick up his bride, you do not know when the Son of Man is coming. I've told you ahead of time that I am coming. I'm giving you warnings. I've given you the signs. But here's what you do not know. You do not know when the Son of Man is coming. In his book, Robert Hardy's 7 Days, Sheldon tells the story of a man who had a dream that he was given only 7 days to live. And as he came to the end of his 7th day, it was made known to him that he wasn't going to die after all. But this is what he said. Some 7 days will be my last 7. And in his dream, that motivated him to live every day as though it were his last. You know, at some point, you will be in your last 7 days, someday. Maybe today begins your last 7 days. And what if you knew that Christ would return in 7 days? How would you live them out? That's what Jesus is asking with these 3 illustrations. How would you respond if I were a thief coming in to break into your home? How would you respond if I were your boss returning to work at an unknown time? How would you respond if I were a groom coming for his bride? Through these 3 examples, Jesus is telling us ahead of time that he is coming back and that he expects his followers to be ready when he comes back. Are you? As you take inventory right now, are you ready? Well, what's the natural question that we should be asking? Jesus told him, be ready, get ready, I'm coming back. You don't know when, be ready. What's the natural question that we should be asking? How? I want to be ready. You've told me ahead of time. And yes, you're my Lord, my Savior. I want to heed your command. Well, how do I do this? What does that look like? I'm so glad that Jesus answers the question. In Matthew 25, verses 14 through 30, Jesus explains how by comparing his return to another employer. This employer delegated the management of his wealth to 3 of his employees while he was gone. It begins like this. Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his property to them. The property that he had entrusted to them was a sum of money that was known as a talent. In the story, a talent is not ability. A talent is not skill. A talent is weight. Weight. See, back in the day, you measured the value of something with scales, weights, and measures. And a talent is estimated to be equal to the weight of silver, ranging around $1,500 to $2,500. In the story, the employees were given a different amount of money to manage and that they would be responsible with. And Jesus explains in the story, here's what it looks like to be responsible. Here's what it looks like to manage what the owner has given you. He says, it wasn't how much they had when they came back. Instead, how to manage it well means this. Did you do something with it? Did you do anything with what you've been given? That's what it means to manage and be responsible with what the master had given. And we know this because the employer suggests that simply putting it in the bank and allowing it to collect interest would have been acceptable to him. Did you do something? Did you do anything with what the master has given you? Well, listen to what happens in verse 19. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The first 2 servants used their talents. As a result of them using them, their talents were multiplied. And the master rewarded them by giving them more, and because they demonstrated that they could be trusted. And so the master says to both of them, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. But the one who was given only 1 talent did not use it. He didn't do anything with it. The story tells us that he buried it. And so the master scolded, punished him, stripped the talent from him. But then we see this similar extreme consequence in verses 28 through 30. For everyone who has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. And whoever does not have, even what he has, will be taken from him. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Jesus, come on. Why are you being so harsh? All he did was bury it. You got it back. I mean, why such the hellish consequence? Well, to Jesus, for someone to be irresponsible with what he or she has been given, for someone to be irresponsible with what God has given them is an indicator that they do not believe. And because they do not believe, they are not ready for his return. In other words, what Jesus is driving home at here is that if we really believe in the gospel, if we really trusted in what Jesus did for us on the cross, we have been rescued from our sin, then our attitude will be one of being responsible with what we've been given. Because time is running out. We haven't been given much time to manage well what God has given us. Are you ready? Are you ready? Jesus stressed that when he returns, everyone will have to give an account for how they have used what God has given them. He is stressing the importance of the person being ready for his return by faithfully using what the Master has given. Are you ready? How are you using what God has given you? Has he given you the gift of time? Each one of us have been given that. We don't know how much time we have left, but he values it so much that he gives it to us 1 second at a time. How are you managing it? Yes, he's given us talents and abilities. He's given us treasures. Is it a skill that you've been given? An ability? Maybe it's a family connection, a social position. Is it education? Or maybe an experience? You see, some of you have been given the talent of, you have this knack for helping others. You can enter into a situation, go into a home, into a kitchen, and you just know, hey, this is where I can be most helpful. You have that innate sense. For some of you, it's you lead. You know how to speak that word of encouragement to somebody else who's discouraged. And others use their time, even when it costs them to help others. But if we're handling this story honestly, the talent invested in this story, you know what it is? It's money. What's being invested in this story is money. Jesus is saying that investing money, not hoarding it, is the wise and responsible thing to do. So here's what we have to remember. That the entrepreneur who starts a new business and figures out a way to give jobs to others, or maybe the health professional who initiates an AIDS awareness campaign, that person is fulfilling this parable just as much as the missionary or the volunteer children's ministry teacher. Here's the thing, and this is what's sad, is that so many simply bury what the Master has given them. How? Jesus has warned us, be ready. I'm coming back. You don't know when, so be ready. How? How do I get ready? Oh, what does that look like? What does it mean to be ready? I want you to write this down. Be ready by being responsible with what you've been given. Be ready by being responsible with what you've been given. Manage it well. Don't bury it. Today, start using it, even if it's in a small way. Use it on behalf of somebody else. Use that talent, that gift you've been given, that ability. Hey, we've all been given the good news of the gospel. Are you sharing it? Are you spreading it? Or are you hoarding it? What about the results that the gospel produces in your life? How about you? Which employee are you? Which employee have you been? The faithful one who did something, anything, or the one who buried their talent? You know, only you and God knows. But the answer to that question will help you discern whether or not you're ready. The answer to that question, which servant have I been, will help you know whether or not you're ready for his return. So how? How do I get ready? How do I obey this command? Number one, be ready by being responsible with what you've been given. Finally, Jesus compares his return to a shepherd king who's separating his sheep from the goats. Jesus compares his return to a shepherd king separating his sheep from the goats. Matthew says towards the end of 25, Jesus says, "When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them one from another, just as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep on his right side and the goats on his left." Now, for those of you who have read and heard this story, you know that the side you want to be on is on the right side. You want to be with all the sheep. Well, how? How do you make sure that you end up on the right side? Well, it depends. You see, the separation in the story depends on how we treat people in need. The separation in this story relies upon how we treat people who are in need. Listen to what the king goes on to say. The king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." You get ready for his return by caring for others. Write that down. I get ready for his return by caring for others. If you are a believer, if you have trusted in the gospel, the good news, then the result of that is that will affect how you treat other people. The righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go visit you?" The king will reply, "I tell you the truth, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did it for me." You see, to be ready means that we can't ignore the plight of people who are suffering hunger, those who are thirsty and naked and homeless, those who are sick and imprisoned. Even what you do for a living, because of your work, God doesn't just give you an income so that you can provide for yourselves and your loved ones. But he also gives you that income so that you have something to give those who are in need. And look at the response to those on his left. Then he will say to those on his left, "Depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me." They will also answer, "Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or needing clothes or sick or in prison and did not help you?" He will reply, "I tell you the truth. Whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do it for me." Then they will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life. If we are taking Jesus' words in this passage seriously, it seems to me that a lot more may hang on our caring for others than we realize. Apparently, to Jesus, our care and concern for others is an indicator of the condition of our souls. And it lets him know. It lets us know whether or not we are ready for his return. Are you ready? If you knew that he was returning in 7 days, would you be ready? How would that cause you to manage your resources? How would that affect how you treat other people? If those are the things he's telling us, this is how you get ready for my return, because they are indicators that you know me, that we have a relationship, and that my life has infected yours, and that I'm really living inside of you. Are you ready? Okay. When Jesus returns, it will be nothing like he came the first time. The first time he was described as a lamb, the lamb who came to take away the sin of the world. But when Jesus returns the second time, he will come as a lion to judge the world for its sin. And I believe that even though I believe that the Bible teaches we won't be here for that judgment, here's what we know, that he has given us more time, more than enough time. He has predicted and he has warned. He has even told us what to do about it. Be ready. And if we found out, and like we found out today, he's even told us how to be ready. Believe in the gospel. Be responsible with what you've been given. Care for others in need. Now, some of you might be thinking, what's the big idea of all this end times, apocalypse talk, why even talk about end times? Why is this important? I mean, does this stuff really even matter? And what should I do about it? Well, did you know that even from the beginning, the Bible continually points us to the future? Let's not lose sight of that. We often get focused on the past and today, but the Bible is talking about the future. God has told us that because of his perfect work of creation, that it was corrupted when Adam sinned, there will be one day in the future where there will be a full restoration of creation in the end. It will be restored to the way God intended it. But this is something that can only happen because of the work of Christ on the cross. And so why does it matter? You see, it's because of his master plan for time that we can live with confidence knowing that our eternal destiny is secure. Even when the world around us is falling apart, even when the world around us is unstable and insecure, because of what he has told us about the future, we can live with confidence. And because of the master's master plan, I can be content no matter what happens. I can be okay. You see, because of the master's master plan, I get to see the end of the story. Jesus saves the day. Jesus saves the day. God wins. The gospel wins. And so as we face trials and tribulations, as we experience setbacks and challenges and difficulties, when I remember that we win, my confidence level goes through the roof. That's what studying the end times and looking at Jesus' return and keeping our eyes at the sky does for us. That's why it matters. And Lord, we thank you for the promise of your return. We thank you, Lord, for the confidence that it gives us. Lord, you have not only told us that you are returning, you've not only warned us and given us interesting indicators of the times of what it would look like, but Lord, you've even told us how to be ready. And God, I pray that we would share the gospel, believe in the gospel, and we would allow our lives to be changed by the gospel, Lord, in the way that we treat others, in the way we handle the gifts that you've given us. In your name, for your glory, in the matchless name of your Son, Jesus. Amen.